This is Chris Baker, the host of the podcast, Tell Me Your Story. And today's special guest is, oh man, come on, you got this, Andratesha Fitzgerald. Okay, boom, got it. And we're going to do
Got
how
it.
we always do. We're just going to jump into this and talk about, from where it started, the early childhood.
So, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and I, my parents had me in their senior year of high school. And so, at an early age, there were some adversities, some hardships, but I learned resilience from them. And at 17, 18 years old, to be able to make the decision to bring a child into this world and to surround her with love was one of the greatest gifts that my mom and dad could ever give to me.
Nice. How was it like growing up in Cleveland?
Growing up in Cleveland, I think that in the community that I grew up in the central neighborhood, close to Fairfax. It's the inner city neighborhood. And I think one of the most characterizing um, qualities of the neighborhood that I grew up in was community and family. And so all of the neighbors knew each other. They would look out for one another. My great grandmother was a charter member of the street club. And so there would be meetings at her home. In fact, the gentleman who is the immediate past mayor of the city of Cleveland was our councilman. And I have fond memories of Frank Jackson coming to our home, sitting with my great grandmother and her club members and listening to the concerns of the neighborhood. And so as a young lady, I got to see um, family members, community members coming together to organize, to really advocate for improvements in the community, improvements in the structures, and just building that bridge from homes and families to government. It was really a part of my upbringing. I have such fond memories of hearing those conversations, listening around the table, watching my family have those conversations over the fence and talking to the neighbors next door and across the street, frequenting the businesses in our community. And it was really a conscientious choice to really support the places where we lived and worked and to invest in our community on purpose.
Just how cool that is, just to grow up in a community like that. Just to be connected
Yes,
to, just really good people, man, that are there supportive and mentors, and I don't think it gets much better than
absolutely.
that.
You know, everyone knew everyone's name. They knew the children, the parents, the grandparents, generations, the cousins. They knew people who came to visit. And I can remember like certain, our mailman, my grandmother would make sure that every Christmas and Easter, we gave him candy and gifts. The bus driver who drove the public transportation back and forth, and I caught public transportation to and from school, she would make sure that she would give him gifts, but not just her. Everyone along the route who utilized the services would make sure that they celebrated just the folks who were doing their jobs. And so there's this sense of gratitude that comes along with a sense of community and knowing each other's names and knowing the stories behind them and then just looking out for one another.
And really, I mean, that's just a good point to tap in on too, especially at a young age, to develop that
Mm-hmm.
spirit of gratitude, just to show it to everyone that you come across. Just to, and that's needed more than ever now, especially. Just how much more people you would be, just appreciate just the everyday worker and how far that
It
goes
goes
too.
goes such a long way. I was saying the same thing that just that small display of gratitude meant so much. I can think about my bus driver, his name was Johnny. And when I was a kid, we would call him Johnny on the bus. I don't know why, but that's what the kids called him, Johnny on the bus. And so Johnny, the smile that would come across his face when he saw my grandmother with the same little packaging that she would use each year. It just literally was like a light came on in his eyes and in his spirit that just really communicated this mutual gratitude one to another. And there was not a day that he didn't look after me or, maybe give me a little fussing if I'm doing too much talking or yelling on the bus. But there was this mutual respect one to another and this mutual gratitude that small display of love and kindness just really lit a fire in his heart.
And just how awesome that is. Kind of like if we're gonna dig into church a little bit, go into the 11th commandment: love thy neighbor.
That's right.
And that's the perfect example right there. It's just to share it, just to show that love for everyone and how far it goes,
Absolutely.
man. And like, there's some days when I'm out and I just go out and just tell somebody like they're doing a great job. I love everything they're doing, or
Mhm.
just compliment somebody. I mean, look at me like, "Are you okay? You just, yeah, right." It's so foreign.
There are times when my husband and I go out with our children, we'll ask for the manager when someone has served us so well. Most of the time, the managers, especially in restaurants, they're only requested when there's a problem. But we made it a practice to, if we have exceptional service, then we ask for the manager and we tell them what was exceptional about our service. They need good news too, and they need to hear when things are going as planned, when people are going above and beyond. And that really just is again giving what you would love to get back. And so we just take that extra moment, that one small act, to just share those acts of excellence that really stand out with the managers instead of just complaining.
And then for the watcher listener right now, I'd like to add on to it a little bit. If you don't quite understand what we're getting at here, is imagine this. Imagine somebody telling you something that just really hit home to you. You feel it in here. But imagine feeling that every day and just spreading that with everybody. Because that's what happens when you do the spirit of gratitude. You say that to everybody and you'll feel it in here. You think a compliment feels good to you. Wait till you do it to everybody else. Then it starts to really, that seed that you plant starts to grow, man. Before you know it, you're just showing love to the whole world.
And what you put out into the world is what comes back to you. It's that principle of reaping and sowing that, man, there's no better feeling in the world when you get that unexpected compliment or just an unexpected blessing. And so we do that for others, and God always makes sure it happens back for us. So,
Especially
mhm.
after like a rough day or something, you hear that compliment. Ooh, oh yeah. Like you don't know how bad I need that.
Exactly.
And if you are having a rough day, whoever watching, listening right now, you're awesome. That's my
Yes, you
compliment to
are.
you. You're awesome.
That's
You
right.
have greatness inside of you, and you're destined to do
Mhm.
great things.
That is the truth. That is the honest to goodness truth. So, whoever you are, if you're listening, take a moment to just receive that, because it's so easy for the inner critic to say that's not true. There is something great inside of each and every one of you. And if you pay attention really closely, you'll see it. And if you start operating in it, you'll believe it.
Amen. Amen. All right, we got to get back into your story.
Okay.
Having a church session over here.
I know,
Um,
right? We had a whole little praise break going.
Church,
I'm here
man.
for it.
How was it for school? I was growing up in Cleveland, going to school out there.
So I grew up in Cleveland and I went to a little school in inner city Cleveland in the Fairfax area, not too far away from where I lived. And the name of the school is St. Adelbert. It is a Catholic school, but it was 100% Black students. Most of us at or just a little above the poverty line. And so, what was so special about our school is that there was a belief in academic excellence. And so, every teacher, every leader believed in each one of us. And so, there was this excellence that was required. I remember my first day of kindergarten. And it's so funny that I can just remember this with such fervor. I've always remembered the first day when we came in, there were two math problems on the board, 1 + 1 and 2 + 3. And my kindergarten teacher expected us to know it. And she said, if you don't know it, that's okay. By the end of today, you will. And so those were the two math problems on the board. And she did somewhat, now that I'm in education, I know that what she was doing was an assessment to kind of see where we were. And she had each of us to come up. We went through letters, we went through words, we went through numbers, we went through colors. And at the end of the day, she placed each of us in groups, and not in groups to demean or to make one group feel less than the other. She wanted us working at the level that she could grow us, that she can push us. And so she was my kindergarten teacher, but she was also my mom's kindergarten teacher.
Wow.
And she went on to become the principal of the school when I was in the second grade. And there was just a love that she exhibited for each one of us. She held us to a very high standard, but she pushed us and encouraged us to be excellent every single day. And so when I think of her, I think of her so fondly. She would have us to stand to our feet, and every day, from kindergarten all the way through eighth grade, I went to the same school, and we would have to say this pledge. And part of the pledge was that we would seek the goals of brotherhood, that we would stand up for what is right from now until Judgment Day, right on. So just imagine a
That,
kindergartner without any knowledge of what injustices awaited in the world was already pledging to stand up for what is right, to seek commonalities of brotherhood amongst all people. It was such a powerful vision statement that she empowered us with in kindergarten, that we said in first grade, in second grade, in third grade. Every single day that I was at school, we said those words. And so in my work now as an educator, as an activist, as an advocate for students of all abilities, particularly Black and Brown learners, I think about standing up and saying, I'm going to seek the goals of brotherhood. I'm going to stand up for what is right for the rest of my life. That I started pledging to do that work when I was 4 years old.
and just
It blows my mind.
how incredible that really is, though, just to have
Hmm.
that written onto you at a very young age, and then to stick with you throughout your entire life.
Absolutely.
What,
And I think it helps me to remember that even the youngest among us can begin to shape their lives with their words very, very early.
and then like everybody, like teacher wise, they were, they helped you and they made sure that they wanted you to succeed.
I had many, many teachers who helped me in my journey. One stands out to me in particular. Her name is Stephanie Tome, and she was my sixth grade teacher. In my fifth grade year, I suffered just some trauma from the way that the classroom was structured, and I felt that pressure to get answers right all the time. I felt the humiliation if I got answers wrong, just from the way that the classroom was structured and set up. But in sixth grade, I think of that as my healing year. It was the year where my teacher really poured into me practices that kind of stayed with me for the rest of my life. She used a lot of songs and poetry and games to bring joy and learning together. And prior to having her, I think I had joyful experiences here and there, but my fifth grade year was so serious and pressure filled that I needed the healing of joy and learning. And that's what she did for me. So I think that all of my teaching practice was modeled on the joy and the healing that I felt in that sixth grade year.
Let's kind of dig into that fifth grade year a little bit, if you're okay with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of explain just a little bit more, just how tough it was for you.
So the fifth, I'll share one story with you from fifth grade. I had a gentleman who was my teacher. He was 6 feet or more, so he's really tall. And as a fifth grader, I remember always feeling like he was humongous. What was more daunting though was that there were some practices that really made me feel singled out. He had a table in the middle of the classroom that he called the honors table. And if you were sitting at the honors table, the expectation was that you would never answer a question incorrectly. And so when I earned the right to sit at this prestigious table in the middle of the room, it came with such a pressure to stay there, to remain there for the full time. And so there was a time when he was teaching Roman numerals, and I felt like, I know that I don't know the Roman numerals, but I'm going to do my best to listen in to see if I can learn. even to this day, XVIIV1, I don't know. That just doesn't do it for me. Roman numerals, just give me the real numbers. And so he called on me. I had not raised my hand. Again, I knew I did not know the answer. And so he called on me unsolicited, and I felt the terror. Have you ever felt that? Like that terror that rises up when you are called on, or there's a pop quiz, there's this anxiety that rises. And now I know that researchers say that what happened in my brain as a 10-year-old is equivalent to what happens if a lion or tiger is chasing you unsolicited. It's the same amount of adrenaline, it's the same amount of stress. And so that's the stress that I felt. And upon giving the wrong answer, which I totally anticipated, he stopped everything in the room and said, get all of your things, grab everything that is yours at that table and move. And he pulled a desk away from even the regular seats in the classroom that students were seated in community around the honors table. And he directed me to a desk that was in the far recesses in the corner of the room away from everyone. And he said, you're not good enough and you're not smart enough to sit at the honors table. And when I gathered my things, I tried to hold on to my dignity as much as I could. I tried to hold in the tears, but I felt ashamed and humiliated. And I believed the words that he was saying. I believed I was not enough or not smart enough. And as I walked to this desk over in the corner, I made a vow to myself that I wouldn't raise my hand, that I wouldn't answer any questions, that if there was any misunderstanding in me, that I would try to melt into the academic fiber, that I wouldn't show up, that I wouldn't show out, that I wouldn't show what I knew. I wouldn't tell anybody if there were things that I didn't know. I made a decision to become invisible, and I tried my best to. And I lived with this terror or this fear that I would be called on, that I would be reduced to tears, that I would be minimalized. And so as I walked from that table, I'll never forget it, to that corner desk, I heard in my mind, you are not enough. And even when I went to sixth grade, and that year was over and that chapter had closed, I really didn't feel worthy to raise my hand or to share an answer or to ask a question. And so, as an educator, I wanted to always create space for students who had been through trauma. I can name that trauma. I can say that that was traumatic. And I wanted to make space for students to be seen, to be heard, to experience joy and feel healing while learning at school, because for others whose story may not be told, for others who had never known that what they've experienced was not right or that it was hurtful or harmful, maybe they believed, I'm stupid, I don't know enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy of an education that meets me where I am. And so I always wanted to be cognizant of those students. I literally search for them and hunt for them. I believe that every learner has a jewel of brilliance on the inside. And just like diamonds that we have to mine for, it's my job as an educator to blast away at every barrier until their gem of brilliance shines. And that's been really my life's work. That experience is one that happened to me. But what I witnessed in that classroom is that I was on edge each day, because if it wasn't me on the hot seat, it was someone else. And I watched countless others experience this trauma and this terror unchecked and unsolicited. So it's really made me cognizant of how I use my words and how I use my encouragement to build up and never, ever, ever tear down.
And most beautiful thing I heard out of that was the fact that, something that bothered you that bad, that messed you up, you said to yourself that I don't want anybody to ever feel like that. No, I don't want nobody to ever feel like that. And that's what I loved when I was like, I seen it, the strategy that you were pulling out of it. You promised to yourself that you would never want anybody to deal with that or ever feel that way. And that is awesome.
I think my greatest joys are when people recognize that they've been seen in my presence, or when my students years later will come back and say, here's what I learned from you, or this is how I felt when I was in your class, or this is what I had gone through prior to, but you let me know that I could write well, or I could read well, or I can enter into academic spaces with what I have to say, that I have something to offer every place I go. That is the most rewarding feeling, I think, for any teacher, to have those seeds planted.
Yeah.
And of course, we plant the seeds. For some, we water. For some, we get to reap the harvest. But for years later, for them to come back bearing the fruit of what seems so small on maybe one given day or one given year, that blossoms into something phenomenal.
That's
Phenomenal.
how, that's how beautiful that is, though, man. Just a kid that probably had no hope at one time, or just felt like he had nothing, or she had nothing. And then
I
for
can totally identify with that.
your encouragement, your words, you planting that seed inside someone. And it's like sometimes you probably wouldn't even think about it like that, but something you said to someone, just inspired them, encouraged them, and stuck with them throughout their entire life up to this point. And for them to come back to, I can only imagine the feeling, like how
Oh,
you were
it is
feeling in that
the
moment, just when
best
they
feeling
came
in the
back.
world.
My question though is the teacher like, did he have a strategy behind it? Did you ever find out, or was that just how it was? Was that how he
he
was
um
teaching?
he has since passed away. I've not I ran into him once when I was in high school, and I was on my way to catch the bus, and my high school was about an hour away from where I lived, and so I was crossing the street, and I heard him call my name, and I knew instantly exactly who it was. And so he ran over to where I was and he asked me how I was doing and how things were going. And he seemed pleased as punch that I was doing well. He had a huge smile on his face that I had a great report that I was, doing well in school. And I told him some of the activities I was involved in. I never spoke to him about that particular incident. I didn't find it necessary to bring up at that time. What I will say is that um, for his strategies, for what he did, I think that each teacher, for better or worse, does what they think is best to grow learners. I think that there was, I'm not sure if he was in the military, but it was a military style classroom. And again, I think that we have to challenge the biases of teachers who work with inner city students. There are ideas that people come into the classroom with about what these kids need. And sometimes it's not congruent with who these kids truly are. And so in education, if you're a teacher or you aspire to be a teacher, I would say get to know each student for who they truly are and don't bring in preconceived notions about what they need or what they must do before you get to know them as a human being. And so I am mindful that my hope is that he was doing the best that he could, or the best that he thought for us. And the challenge is to um, I think it said like this: you keep the meat, you spit out the bones. I will say that there are many things that I learned from him. And even in that humiliation and dejection, I learned to find a way to use what I know to figure out what I don't. I found a way to calm myself when my anxiety was through the roof. I found a way to continue to perform even on days when I felt broken down and hopeless. And so, in that, I have to take away the strategies that emerged from the terrible situation. I do not wish that on any child, but I do know that in myself, I found a resilience that lasted far beyond the terror that I was experiencing at the time.
Well said, well said. All right, going into the high school, how was that experience? Did you play sports?
So in elementary, like, well, I went to the same school, K through 8. So in 7th and 8th grade, I was a cheerleader. And I really enjoyed that, pep. I love basketball. My cousin was on the basketball team. I was a cheerleader, and we competed on a national level. So that was really fun. In high school, I did not do cheerleading or a dance team or any of that. I helped to start a dance team at my high school, and I did more like coaching, but not participating at that time. But what I did find at my high school was phenomenal community. I went to Villa Angela St. Joe's High School in Cleveland, Ohio, home of Clark Kellogg and Desmond Howard for all you basketball and football folks. But what I experienced was just amazing community. So my elementary school was K through 8, and it was predominantly Black. My high school was 9 through 12, and it was predominantly white. And so I remember in my very first set of days, like in the first weeks, there were a few students who looked like me and a lot of students who didn't. And there was a group of us that had a nice number of classes together. And so we decided, with no prompting from adults, I think this is hilarious. Like, we decided that we would just go in one of the practice rooms for the choir, and we just asked each other questions. Many of them had come from schools that didn't have very many Black folks. And of course, I was at a school with very few white folks. And so we sat down together and asked each other questions and talked to each other about our backgrounds, our past, what thoughts we asked about hair and hair care. And we just talked to one another. And I found in that interaction the power of relationship building through conversation. Many of those folks that were in my ninth grade, that first little cohort of ninth graders, we still keep in touch to this day. And I am just grateful for the opportunities and the friendships that really grew as a result of curiosity, of true compassion and care, and really breaking down walls on purpose and then teaching others to do the same along with us. So in high school, I was more involved with the literary magazine, Peer Ministry. It was where I kind of found a joy in my relationship with God that could serve others. And so I learned a lot about myself in 9 through 12. I learned a lot about friendships and the power of really serving others with smiles, with joy. I can remember just being in high school, walking through the halls, arm in arm with my friends, high-fiving people. It was people all around. And I found that I love to serve and I love to just build relationships. I still do.
And well, you said it was just like, how was the culture difference, like going from an all Black to pretty much an all white? How was that for you?
So I think going to a Catholic elementary school that was really Afrocentric, it was all of the images of Jesus on the wall were Black, all the saints Black. Um, all of the messages that were hanging in the classroom. I remember this one poster, and I have Googled it to find like a picture. It says, "I know I'm somebody because God don't make no junk." And there was a little Black boy with the afro, and he's got his little praying hands. And so all of the imagery, all of the messaging was, you are great. You are amazing. The color of your skin is beautiful. We celebrated the principles of Kwanzaa, one each month for the entire year. And so it was like we would celebrate Nia as faith or purpose, and we would, Imani is faith, and Nia is purpose, and Kujijagalia is self-determination. And so we had these beautiful celebrations. We also studied Black history explicitly in our K through 8 upbringing. And so we had our regular history curriculum, but then we learned about the African dynasties and kings and queens. And so this was all I knew. I knew that Black was beautiful and that, we were brilliant and exceptional. And then when I went to high school, I think the thing that surprised me most was that in my ninth grade year, people would say, "Oh, you you're really smart," and I was thinking, "Well, yeah, I mean, like I expected greatness from myself, but I didn't realize that people were surprised because of the color of my skin." And so it let me in culturally on a piece that I had never experienced before. I remember when I was in the 11th grade, I was coming out of my math class, and I had a bunch of books. I always had a bunch of books in my book bag, and I was always trying to get as much work done during the day as I could because I didn't want to take all of the books home. And so I was talking and bumped into one of the baseball players. I didn't think it was a big deal. I had dropped some of my stuff, and some of his stuff knocked out of his hands, and he called me a black bee. And it was the first time that the B word wasn't what bothered me the most. It was that he described me as a black bee. And I was like, what was that about? Well, unbeknownst to me, as I'm scrambling to pick up my stuff off the ground, before I could even respond, um, there was another student who was coming out of the class right after me. He happened to be um, a football player and a world-class shot putter. And so he's a big guy, black guy. And he addressed the situation immediately. And my eyes were open to issues of race and racism, issues of bias, and the way that people see me because of the color of my skin. There was a different expectation about who I was or what I could do or my capacity, and not necessarily always from teachers. I will say that the teachers had an expectation for me. There was support when I needed. There was just this little element of surprise when I could grasp chemistry at a level that was faster than my peers, or when I would write creatively and it would be intriguing to all kinds of readers. And so there was a surprise that really, when you boil it down, is racism, is implicit bias. And so navigating through that and not quite understanding because I didn't have a context for it, I did not make sense of it really until I moved on to college. And so I remember meeting with my guidance counselor my 11th grade year. Again, my GPA was above, it was like 3.4, 3.5. So I had a really good GPA. I had taken challenging classes because I've always thought from the 7th grade on up that I would be an engineer. I didn't become one, but I always thought that I would be. I love science, I love math, but I also love English and literature. And so when I met with my guidance counselor, I said, I want to be an engineer. And I told her some of the colleges that I was considering. And she's like, well, why don't you try community college? Well, there was nothing about my transcript that suggested that I would not be accepted into rigorous programs. There was nothing in my makeup that would say that I wasn't prepared for engineering. In fact, I took all college prep or honors courses at the high school. I took architectural drawing. And so I didn't understand why she was pushing me in a different direction. I ignored her, it didn't matter. But I understand now that her expectations for me were low because I was Black, because I was female, because I was a little bit younger than those in my class. And so those things stuck with me. And to this day, I think about not just her words, but her expectations and what in her expectations was hidden. And it took me a while to uncover because, again, where I come from, K through 8, was you have everything you need to excel in this world. You are competitive, you will do well, you are of genius, you come from greatness. And then to be surprised that I could comprehend, or that I could write well, or that I could grasp upper level chemistry and physics. Um, it came as a surprise to me, but it was not a hindrance for me. When the expectations will become a barrier, but when you have the motivation along with barrier breaking skills, then that means that regardless of the expectation, the adversity won't hold you back because you are built to overcome.
Amen. I mean, and that's like what's also great though is like just being brought up and being taught the right things and being told that you know you were like I said, but like we were talking about earlier, you're destined for greatness. It's
That's right.
inside you. You came from greatness. A lot of people miss that message when you go to church. I'm bringing back it up, but it's there. You were made in the image of God, and He's inside of all of us. And everybody seems to miss that. Like, you are capable of doing anything. It's written everywhere.
Yep. And I think that there is not one of us that has to do life alone or to solve all the problems that we come up against alone. It's so important to have community that speaks truth and love commingled. And not just truth. Truth without love is brutality, and love without truth is just sentiment. And so when we have love and truth together, that means that greatness that's in you, if you are operating beneath it, then I can call that out. And if that greatness within you is taking your ego too far, then I can call that out as well. Because we trust each other, because we built life together, then that means that we can grow together. And I can't speak enough. I talked about the community of my great grandmother, the community that I grew up in, the community I found at my elementary school, and then the community that really pushed me to find my greatness at the high school as well.
It's just it's awesome. The community that you were surrounded with all the way up. And it has it stuck with you throughout your entire life now that I think about it?
I think that community as I knew it then has changed quite a bit. Um, I realize and I hold precious the power of those times where you're in community with such a large number of people. So there were about 24, 25 people in each class, and each of us striving for excellence, not without conflict. Of course, with children, there's going to be conflict along the way, but I didn't realize how special of a place St. Adelbert was to really teach us how to have conflict, when to enlist the help of an adult, when to work it out amongst ourselves, how to solve problems together, how to greet every single person by name. My name is Andratesha. And from K through 8, I was called Andratesha. And so when I went to high school and people would say, well, what do we call you for short? I had never been asked that question before in my life. So I was like, what do you mean for short? Like, what do you mean? I had no idea. And I find it so heartwarming when I run into people from elementary. And again, it's a K through 8 school. So everyone from 8th grade down knew the kindergartners. And as you matriculate up, you meet every child. Everyone in the school knew everyone else. And so there is a beautiful cadre of folks in this area who call me Andratesha. And there's just something special about being called by name. There's some people from my high school, they call me Tisha, and I don't have a problem with that. But there's something beautiful about having a name and it not being labeled as difficult, and having a name that people take the time and intention to get to know and say it perfectly each time. My heart is like swelling with just that. And so community for me has changed a bit over the years, as it does for everyone. But I think on those times in elementary and high school with such pride and fondness, and many of the friends that I made along the way, I still keep and hold dear, and we still keep in touch. And so now my community is, the people that I do the work of education with, and of course, my friends and family along the way, and then the community that I've built together with other educators who are activists and advocates for all students.
I just want to tap out on your name. Did your parents come up with it? Is there a history behind it?
So my mom and dad, I always say creative parents in the 70s. So my mom and dad combined my dad's middle name along with their favorite cousin's first name. And so his middle name is DeAndre and her name was Tish. And they said Tisha didn't sound correct to them. So they changed it to Andratesha. And that's how I got my name.
Awesome. I love your name, by the way.
Thank you. It took me a while to grow into it. I can't say that I've always loved it, but I've learned to love who I am and what it represents. And so I'm grateful to carry the legacy of my daddy and their favorite cousin Tish, and put those together. And so it's who I am, Andratesha.
Beautiful, man, beautiful. All right, back to the now we're gonna get more into your career. Well, I should
Hmm.
say get into college. So you were decided you wanted to be an engineer,
Hmm.
but then
I,
when did it change for you? When did you decide that you wanted to pursue what you're doing now?
I went to college on a full scholarship for engineering. A full scholarship for engineering. And so here, there, while I was in the classes, learning about the principles of engineering, these foundational, two things. The class load for engineers was 21 credit hours my first semester, 18 credit hours my second, and then 20 the third. And so my first year, while everyone was socializing and building community, I was studying, like sun up to sundown, studying. And that was heartbreaking for me because I love meeting people and I didn't get a chance to do that because the only people I met was honors chemistry 1, 2, and 3, and Fortran and all of the engineering stuff, calc. So in the meantime, I did an internship between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college at a minority-owned engineering firm called Polytech at the time. And I learned AutoCAD and I could tinker a bit, but my main role was to correct drawings that were to corresponding with this rapid station that was being built for public transportation. So my role was just to correct those drawings. And I thought, this is not quite interesting to me, but I'm going to stick with this. And so then I did my first year in engineering. And of course, the coursework was not that bad, but it just wasn't, I didn't have a community in many of my classes. I was the only Black person, the only female, the only person from America, and the only person who was like under 25. And so Cleveland State University is not like a trip. It's a commuter campus. And so I found myself isolated in so many ways, and I didn't understand quite why. But in between my freshman year and sophomore year, I did another internship, and this one was at NASA. And so I said to myself, if I'm supposed to be an engineer, then I will love this. And so I was on the Advanced Communication Technology satellite, where we acquired the telemetry for the Earth stations and calculated all of these things. It was the first satellite to integrate data, voice, and phone over one satellite. So it was really interesting, but I didn't love it. And so I started wondering, okay, if I'm at NASA doing groundbreaking work with folks who are really the first in the world to do this kind of thing, and it's not lighting my fire, then is engineering really for me? But true to Andratesha form, I didn't want to give up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try one more internship. And this third internship was in the chemical engineering department at Cleveland State University. And the supervising professor, who is now the dean of the college, she was awesome. I learned a lot from her. And it was so wonderful to have a woman in engineering to learn from, to talk to. However, it was biochemical engineering. And I just didn't find a spark or a light. And so I made the decision to follow my heart and switch my major to English. When I switched my major to English, I was delighted by reading the literature and analyzing the passages and talking with others about how the biographical sketch of the author has influenced how people see the work. And so I didn't quite know what I was going to do, but I earned a degree in English, and I also simultaneously had a minor in women's studies. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do. And I saw a flyer in the elevator. This is so serendipitous. A flyer in the elevator for a program for educators. And it said, if you have one career and you would like to switch to education, talk to us. We have a 1-year master's program in education. So I turned in my transcripts to them, and they said, do you want to be a science teacher? And I said, no. They said, oh, do you want to teach math? I said, no, I want to teach English. And they said, but in science and math, we can guarantee that you'll get a job right away. I was like, I don't care. I want to teach English. And so I did the 1 year master's program, and I literally fell in love with teaching and learning. And that summer in between my bachelor's and master's degree, I lived in residence through a program called Upward Bound. It's a TRIO program, a federal program for potential first generation college students. So inner city kids, 9 through 12, 100 of them lived in the dorm, and I lived in residence with them for 6 weeks. Now I didn't sleep and it was crazy, but I had this fire. I had the time of my life. I learned so much about them and helping them to grapple with decisions and career paths and academics and study skills. And this became the catalyst for my passion of education. And so I did that master's program in 1 year. I literally graduated on Sunday, started the master's program on Monday, and 1 year later, graduated with my master's degree and got a job at the place where I student taught. And I stayed there for 20 years.
How amazing that is that you switched over and you just found that passion, that love, that fire inside you, and that just kind of explain how easy it became for you just to teach others, to just to learn it, to take it all in.
Yeah, it's so important for us not to go the path that seems like the one that's going to lead to prosperity, or the one that others have picked for you, or the ones that may seem like the easiest way to go, but to choose a path that is fortified with our passions and the supports to get us to where we're supposed to be. Like, we have to pay attention to that feeling on the inside. What brings you joy? What brings you this enthusiasm and energy that you could do all day without prompting or prodding? So that's how I found my joy.
And that's what it's really all about. And, for the
That's right.
watcher listener, you just got to find what you love doing. And that's really what your calling is. What comes easy to you. And that's how you know that is your God-given purpose. Whatever it's easy, just easy for you to do. That's your calling. That's what you're meant to do. And that's my advice to you right now who's watching and listening. Whatever you're doing right now, that may not be your actual job, but you love doing it. You might want to think about that and possibly turn that into your career. Just saying.
I think the Bible says it like this: your gift will make room for you. And so there is a gift that each of us has. There's a brilliance that has to shine. It has to. And so we have to be attentive. When I worked at NASA, I would spend time during my lunch writing poems or reading books. And it literally would get me through the day for all of the other things that I had to do. And I can remember back when I was in the second grade, I was published for the first time in second grade in the school newspaper. And that joy and exhilaration of publishing, I said, I want to be a writer. But those dreams kind of turn into what makes other people ooh and ah when you say it. And so nobody oohs and ahs when you say you want to be a writer. But I had to return to that passion. And in 2020, when my book, Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning, Building Expressways to Success, was published, that same feeling that I had as a little girl in the second grade is the same feeling that I had as a grown-up, helping people to learn and grow as teachers, leaders, and educators. It was that same feeling. And so again, just like Chris said, be attentive to your passions, what gives you joy, what energizes you. That's what's going to take you to the next level.
Didn't know you wrote a book though. I'm gonna have to check that one
Yes.
out. Definitely have to check that one out. I'm a reader myself. Reader/writer. I love doing that actually. And a lot of people that, I'll say this too, a lot of people that are watching, listening, they're probably like, Chris, you like to read? Oh, I love to read. I love to read. Talk
That's
about having
awesome.
active imagination. That's nothing wrong with that, guys. You actually, a lot of people say this is hocus pocus up here, but like we were talking about earlier, your words are mouth. You plant seeds with your mouth. Imagination, the stuff that you think, it comes into existence in the long run.
That's right.
And the more
That's
you
right.
read, and you say you can't control your thoughts, though, read more. That's how you get control of that. It eases it, it calms you down. You're able to calm that down. That inner voice that's telling you all this stuff. Read. It helps out in the long run. Okay. So what do we got left? So we got into once you started getting into teaching. How was that your first year?
Ooh, the first year of teaching. The beauty of my situation, though, was that I did my student teaching in the same place where I did my first year teaching. And I was able to teach summer school in between my student teaching and then my real teaching year. The summer school students that I had taught me so much about myself. They taught me about true dynamics of classroom. And I'll just explain a little bit about what I mean. So summer school sessions were 3 weeks for 6 hours a day. So I had the same students from 9 to 12 and then 12:30 to 3:30 every day for 3 weeks. And so I had to learn the dynamics of engagement to really, there is no way you can just lecture for 6 hours every day. So I had to learn just different ways of designing the class to receive their attention. And there was the teacher who had a large class that really enabled me to be able to teach that summer. She had 30 students. And so they said that was too many. And so they added a position so that I could teach. And so I had 15 students in my class. But here's the caveat. The teacher who had 30 had the opportunity to select who she wanted out of her class. And so just imagine who she put with me. And so I had 15 students who the teacher lovingly released to my care. And so there were behavior concerns, there was attitude, there was all kinds of different things that other people would see as a barrier. But for me, I saw it as a chance to really reach and meet each student, to know them, to get to serve them with this learning. And so those 15 students that I worked with that summer literally gave me every challenge that I needed in order to grow as a teacher. I could be honest and transparent with them and say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's what I expect. What do you expect of me? And so when I ask them questions like, well, what do you expect? I want you to give me feedback. I want you to tell me about what's working for you and what's not working. They would look at me like, are you really asking us to tell you that? And so it introduced this other dynamic. And there was one student in my class that summer who refused to call me, I was Miss Munn at the time. He refused to call me Miss Munn. He would only call me Fam. And I'm like, brand new teacher. I'm like, no, you have to call me Miss Munn. He's like, I'm not calling you that. And so I felt like there was this power struggle going on because, I'm a new teacher. I'm like, you really have to call me Miss Munn. He refused. And so anything that I asked him to do, he would say, Fam, I'll do this. And he was very negotiating. And I'm like, no, I am not negotiating. I learned at that time that every individual brings power into the room. It's just whose power do we accept or encourage and whose power do we shun or push out? He never called me Miss Munn. And so he called me Fam the entire time. He was in 11th grade and he graduated from high school, and he went on to sign a contract with Major League Baseball after he graduated. So he graduated and then he went off to spring training. He came home to visit. He was 19 years old. He was shot and killed while he was walking down the street.
Wow.
What I learned really quickly is in urban education, we have to hold precious every moment we have with our students. I so felt endeared to him because he saw me as family. And I would ask other teachers, does he call you Fam? No, he calls me Miss this or Miss that. He only called me Fam. Wow. He saw something in me that endeared me to him and him to me. And so close to the end of our time together, I just accepted the fact that I'm fam. Nobody else is in the building. Every other adult gets to be Miss or Mr., but I am fam. And so what used to be like a point of power struggle became the most comforting words that I had upon learning of his demise. And so there was one activity that I had every student to do. I wish I knew what he wrote in this letter. I had every student write a letter to themselves. And I wish I knew what he wrote to himself. I wish I knew fully the dreams that he had when he came into my classroom. But what I learned is that every learner that we serve has a dream for themselves. Every single one of them has something that they want to achieve, something that they want to see come to pass as a result of their life. Now, here's what none of us know is how many days we have left to achieve that. For him, there were not very many between the time he graduated from high school and the time that he left. But what I will tell you is that he lived every day with this joy. He would laugh, he would smile, he had jokes. There was nothing that could rattle him. Even when I was doing my stern teacher voice, nothing rattled him. He was always calm, cool, and collected, and he enjoyed life. And as I look back and as I reflect, I enjoyed him. Every memory that I have of him, whether it's of struggle or not, brings me a smile to my face. And when I think of the name that he had for me, fam, it brings joy to my heart. And so that was very early in my teaching career. But from that time, in that class of 15, 3 students have passed away. And I've learned the brevity of life. There have been so many students who have come, who have gone because of transiency, moving from here to there. There are those that I get to see on a regular basis and those that I'll never hear from again. And so there is this brevity of exchange that we have, both with students in our classroom and with colleagues along the way, this brevity that I now recognize and hold so precious. Each conversation, each memory, each little note that I know I have a million of them. My husband probably is like, at some point you're gonna have to do something with this stuff. But each note, each little gift, each card, those things are precious to me because I realize the brevity of life, both mine and theirs. And I realize that the exchange between us is only for a moment and each moment is precious.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love that though. Called you Miss Fam.
Just
And then
fam, not miss, fam.
bam, bam, and just and like you said, it was a power struggle until you later, you learn later and down the line that you were the only one getting called that, and it was a deeper meaning to it. It's like, wow, that's deep. That's deep. So, how is your career going now?
I worked in that same district for 20 years, and just recently in December, I just took a leap of faith and had a career change. So I am now working at a county agency, helping districts to diversify their workforce and really make sure that the workforce matches or mirrors the students that they serve. So it's a little bit different, but in my time in that school district, I went from teacher to administrator, both at the building level and at the central office. And so I learned a lot about I was curriculum director for a little while. And each time my superintendent would have a need or find a different role that they would like me to try to grow and stretch me. And so I've done grants in the school setting, and so managed a multi-million-dollar grant portfolio, both competitive and non-competitive. And then most recently, I've also done human resources to really connect that curriculum or teaching and learning background with the talent management and the increasing the skills of the workforce. So I've had a beautifully diverse experience in schools, and now working for the county agency, working with 4 districts. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I'm modeling what it is that I expect from my students, that we find this resilience, that we work to learn and discover more about ourselves as we help and serve others with the work that we do.
You're a jack of all trades. As we begin to wrap this thing up, is there anything that I haven't covered yet that you would like to talk about as well?
In the releasing of my book in 2020, I had a chance to work with Samaria Rice, who is the mother of Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice is a 12-year-old young boy who was killed by the police in Cleveland. And so Samaria is his mom, and she wrote the foreword to my book. From that work, from meeting her, from hearing her story, um, she has a knack for turning tragedy into triumph. And listening to her, and after the murder of George Floyd, I felt that I wanted to do something with my words and with my work that would make a difference, a global impact. And that's why I wrote the book, Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning. And it also gave me the opportunity to help districts and colleges and universities and organizations think about how do we structure and design so that every learner has what they need, is met where they are, and shines the way that they were born to. And so I launched my own company and started in entrepreneurship, a company called Building Blocks of Brilliance. It's buildingblocksofbrilliance.com. And that helps schools, organizations, colleges, and universities really meet the needs of all learners, particularly those who are Black and Brown or have a minoritized or marginalized identity.
And how is it at your speaking events when you go to them?
That is joy work. It is life giving, and it's designed to meet every hearer where they are. So I use pictures, words, stories, games to really give everyone a chance to interact with the information, but learn about themselves as they learn how to grow others.
Amen. And then would you say, like, so far as you really, look at your life, would you say it was like really built on that community that you grew up in that helped you develop who you are now?
I would say it's based on community, but rooted in faith. And I've had many opportunities to see the faith that was believed for me to come to pass in me. And I'm so grateful for a community that practices what they preach.
Amen. Amen to that. All right, so now we get to ask the fun questions that people want to know about. Where did you find your husband? How did you guys meet?
We met at church. I met him when I was 12, couldn't stand him. Um, he, I was, we were at an event, the 100th anniversary of the church, and he was standing in the chair pulling a balloon down. You know how they had the balloons with the little strings on them. So he's pulling a balloon down for his cousin. And I said something smart. I did. And he took a cup of red punch and poured it on me. I had on a white dress. And so I did not speak to him for 2 years. I was 12 years old. And so, but somewhere along the line, things changed. And yep, I met my husband in church. We were in the same confirmation class. And that's where I met him.
Have you traveled anywhere?
So the farthest away from home I've been is Northern Ireland. I went to Northern Ireland 7 years ago. I can't believe that. 7 years ago on a missions trip. And really, we went into communities that are still very separate, Protestant communities and Catholic communities. We served both. And so we went into the Protestant estates, into the Catholic estates, and did events for children, really gave them a chance to just have a good time, to learn more and play. And then we hosted events that on neutral grounds that brought both together. And the most impactful story, I remember we were singing a song by Toby Mac called Speak Life, and we were doing these little hand motions. And as both Protestants and Catholics, children, adults, all playing on this neutral ground, a rainbow came out over us as we were singing Speak Life. And then
Wow.
a second rainbow came out over that. So that's one of those amazing, life-changing travels that I'll never forget. And one of my favorite places in Northern Ireland is Giant's Causeway, where there are these hexagonal rock formations that are perfectly hexagonal, that have been there since the Ice Age. And I thought, oh, how powerful that this was created before anything about me was thought of, and it still remains for my eyes to see today. So
All right, and now kind of go back just a little bit,
Mhm.
just in case somebody is dealing with the same, what you dealt with in fifth grade, just feeling isolated, feeling like just not themselves, and they still kind of feel like that to this day, since that happened to them at some point in their life. What would your advice be to that person watching or listening right now?
What I would say to the person who feels isolated, who has been hurt, who's not been heard, who's been pushed to the corner in any way, shape, or form, is that your life has purpose and that the things that have happened to you do not get the opportunity to define you. That all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. That's what I believe. And I've seen those very things that hurt me, that were meant to shut me down or shut me up, that pushed me to the side, that really made me feel small and invisible, that those are the very things that help me connect with others who feel that way and push them forward. You are not what you've been through. What you've experienced does not define you, that there are greater things ahead if you run on to see what they are, and that even this season, even this time will be used to encourage someone else. And so I would just say there is more. You are greater. You will make it, and you'll understand why someday.
Beautiful. Beautiful, man. Got me all. All right, that's it. Everybody heard her story, and I know without a doubt somebody's been touched, somebody's been inspired, somebody's been encouraged. But, the final question, if somebody would like to reach out to you and actually talk to you, how can they get in contact with you?
The best way to get in touch would be www.buildingblocksofbrilliance.com or on LinkedIn or Twitter, Andratesha Fitzgerald.
All
On
right,
Twitter, it's Fritz Tisha, FritzTesha. Everywhere else, Andratesha Fitzgerald. And on buildingblocksofbrilliance.com, you can find all my socials. So hit me up.
should love to hear from you. So this has been another episode of Tell Me Your Story, and you actually heard the Andre Teresa story. Is that the correct way to say it, right?
Andratesha.
Andratesha story.
There
You
you go.
heard her incredible story. And also, I'd like to add before I end this, if you would like to come on and tell your story sometime, this is what this platform is for. It doesn't matter who you are. You can come on and tell it just like how she did, from the beginning all the way to the end. You can even talk about your testimony if you want. That is allowed out here.
I love that.
But this is Chris. I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll see you again next time. Peace.